a few years ago, and we started going with this newer one, which is a touchpad console. The touchpad console, you can see it's a lot more compact now. Now we're making advancements in the electronics and stuff, and one of the things that we're doing also, this only controls hydraulics. It does not control any lighting on the truck. It don't control the emergency lights. It don't control the spreader light and stuff like that. We've separated these circuits. This particular panel here strictly controls the hydraulics only, because what's happened over the years is a lot of these chassis manufacturers now have like a little 6-pack of switches and things like that that goes in the dash that you can turn these emergency lights and spreader lights and stuff like that, and we usually use those. You usually call for a few of them anyway for your purpose to add things after the fact, so we hijack a couple of them as well for our purposes for those things. So we're separating electrical output from hydraulic is what we're doing when we went to this particular panel here. Now the good thing about this one is a lot of all this hard wiring, and I had to be the first one to say I'm old school. I like this kind of stuff right here. I enjoy this. But you know, times have changed. A lot of this hard wiring that we used to have to do here looks like a bowl of spaghetti back behind this panel. All of it's turning into integrated circuits now, circuit boards and things like that. And that's the transition that happened about 5-6 years ago with this particular unit. It's a lot more compact. This thing weighs less than 2 pounds for sure. Maybe about 1 pound is about what it weighs. But hydraulically it does the same thing as the other one. And we just do it a different way. That's all. It's just a newer way. Now, the thing that I do like about this particular one, now when we first started putting these in, they may have been bolted on the bracket to the floor or may have been bolted to the dash. But the newer way now is actually attaching them to the seat. So most of your trucks have an air ride seat in it. So this thing has a bracket bolted to the seat base and an arm sticking out on it that this thing is mounted to. So it's literally right here at your fingertips when you're trying to operate your truck. A lot of times when I'm driving a truck, and we do have some demo trucks, and I'll probably put more miles on them than anyone does at our place. But a lot of times when I'm going down the road, I just lay my hand on top of this thing. You know, so I'm ready to operate my hydraulics at any given time. I can just use my thumb and just do what it is I need to do. The good part about being seat mounted like that is, and you that have driven a truck like this, you know what I'm talking about. As you're bouncing up and down in this seat, this thing is bouncing up and down with you. So you're not losing your line of sight. Like trying to adjust a radio or something like that, you reach out, try to adjust the radio, and you turn it up too much or you turn it down too much. This one is actually riding with you. So you don't lose your line of sight, and is a whole lot more concise when it comes to being able to make the adjustments and stuff on here. Plus it's adjustable. You know, whether you're a short driver, tall driver, you know, however you like to mount your seat, you can move this thing around, put it wherever you want it. You can literally put it right here in front of your face if that's where you wanted it at. So it's for your convenience and your safety to put it in the proper position based on what you need for your operations. Now this particular unit obviously is simplified compared to these, but hydraulically we're getting the same thing done. And from an operational standpoint, I'm kind of going to be going over this. Just keep in mind, we're doing the same thing as what we did on these other 2 consoles, just doing it a different way. Up in the upper left-hand corner is our master switch. And remember, when you're not using your hydraulics, switch this thing off. It's your safety, that's your safety line to help prevent accidental operation or something like that. Because ultimately, a lot of people don't realize it, but based on federal law, you are ultimately responsible for the safe operation of that vehicle. Is the operator of that vehicle. You're ultimately responsible for that. And that's based on federal law. So what I ask you to do here is use this switch more often. Turn this thing on when you need your hydraulics, turn it off when you don't need your hydraulics. I mean, it's just that simple. Because that's your safety line right here to help prevent accidental or unauthorized operation of the equipment. All right, in no particular order, I'm going to kind of be going around the outside perimeter and then we'll finish up in the middle. So in no particular order here, the next button we have is a blast button. And the blast button is the same as it is on these 2 right here. You press the button in for blasting your spreader across the bridge or across an intersection or up or down a ramp for an interstate or something. And as long as you hold this button in, it blasts. When you release the button, it goes back to whatever the presets were for the spinner and conveyor. Now, we do have another feature here. I don't necessarily recommend using this feature, but this is another thing that happens too. I'll go on a sidebar here to let you know that there are some features that are programmable features that are in this thing. And so where these older consoles, there were no programmable features at all. There were only a few adjustments and that's it. Now we actually have programmable features. And the blast button has a programmable feature to use as a momentary button, just like I just described, or we have a timed function too, that when you press the button, you can let it go, and it'll go for a certain amount of time, number of seconds, and then it'll automatically shut off and go back whatever the presets were. I don't necessarily recommend that. There are some facilities that wanted that, but I would dare say it's less than 5% of the people that would want that. I wouldn't want a time function because if I'm doing my route out here, my ramps are a different length, my intersections are different sizes, my bridges are different lengths, and to me a time function in that environment doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If I'm doing the same road and I've only got one bridge to do on that road that I'm doing, yeah, time function might work fine. But other than that, I would prefer a momentary button that you just hold it in when you need blast, release it when you want to go back to the preset. So that is a programmable feature that's there. I'll talk with the technicians a little bit later on about how these things can be activated and deactivated, but I can tell you the factory default is a momentary button, and I would recommend that you leave it at that. And I only tell you these things just because some of them may be good ideas, but in this particular situation, I don't think this one is as good of an idea. But from the engineering group, they decided to put it in there because we did have a few requests for it. All right, the next one is that it's a pause button. And this pause button, what happens here is when you turn this main power button on right here, this pause button automatically lights up. Every time you turn this on, that's how you know this thing is powered up, is that the pause button lights up. The pause button is for the spreader. It automatically goes into pause when you turn it on. The spreader don't automatically operate when you turn the main power on. It goes into pause. It's waiting for you to unpause this, no different than a VCR or something like that. You know, that's what the pause button's for there. Now, when you don't have a spreader installed in the truck, there's no reason for this light not to be lit up. This light should always be lit up if you don't have a spreader on your truck, because you always want it in pause. That's what the button means here. When the light is lit up, we are in pause. That means the spreader's not going to work. So if it's not installed on the truck, or maybe I'm coming back to the salt dome to get me some more salt or whatever, I want to turn my spreader off, so I will press the pause button. This light will light up, and I know I'm in a holding pattern or a pause at this point for the spreader. All right, the next one is going to be ground speed. This one has another programmable parameter. I'm going to tell you what it is, and I'm going to make a recommendation on this one too. But with the technicians, I'll show you a little bit later on how you can go in here and change it if you so choose. But in this particular one, ground speed is the same thing as automatic or manual. Remember, we had a toggle switch on this one, and we had a rocker switch over here. This one has just this little press button that we can select between manual and, so to speak, automatic. Now, if you turn this light off, that means we're in manual. So you're going to have to remember to turn the spreader off when you get to the stop sign or stop light. But if you leave the ground speed on, then that spreader is going to speed up with the truck speed, and it's going to slow down with truck speed. And when the truck slows down to a stop at the stop sign or stop light, the spreader stops. Now, here's another thing that has happened in the advancements of electronics. These two systems right here that have the circuit board that the technicians are familiar with, they're not as sensitive on these older trucks as what this one is on the newer truck. So to make a long story short is, even though the speedometer signal electronically has gotten a little bit more weak over time, it's still a speedometer signal, but it's not using as much power to make that thing work anymore. This thing can read it. No matter how weak that signal is, this thing can read it. So that's some of the advancements in this product here, is to be able to read that weak signal. So literally, this system here, remember I used the 20-mile-an-hour rule for these other two consoles? It doesn't matter with this one, because we're going to be able to read it right on down to 0. So as you're slowing down for that stop sign or stop light and coming to a stop, if you have this ground speed lit up, that means that spreader automatically starts slowing down too, along with the truck. And when the truck stops, boom, spreader stops. When the truck starts back up again, spreader starts back up again. So you don't have to worry about these things as much anymore. And run them in manual, and remember to turn the spreader on and turn the spreader off. So this is done for you with this one. It can read these more sensitive signals, these output signals, so we've got you covered on that one. Technicians, there's a feature here that we can turn on or turn off. I'll describe that to you later. I'd recommend just to leave it like it is, but I'm at least going to tell you what they are. All right, over here we've got a dump body function, which is the same thing as the other controls here, same thing as joystick and the rocker switch console. It's a momentary button. When I press the arrow up, body should be going up. Press the arrow down, body goes down. When you release the button, the body stops wherever it's at, whether it's all the way up, all the way down, or part of the way in between. When you release the button, that bed stops. And just strictly a momentary function. Down here in the lower right-hand corner are my plow functions, and these are just simple arrows. Up means up, down is down, left is left, right is right. Whatever pad here that you touch to operate the plow is the way that plow is supposed to be going. Notice we don't have the mode button anymore. The mode button went away, but we did separate these two. Notice that this one is in the top of the console here, and this one's down in the bottom of the console. So these are separated at this point. Now we're going to skip over the one here in the middle. I'll get back to it in a minute. But the next one we got over here in the lower left-hand corner is tarp cover and tarp uncover. Whether it's a hydraulic cover or an electric cover, we can operate both of them. If it's a hydraulic cover, it's relatively easy because all we're doing is just firing a hydraulic valve. But if it's an electric cover for you technicians, this is a very low amperage output. So we're using the reversing relay up underneath the cab to be able to go forward and reverse on that tarp cover. So this can power the signal going to the reversing relay for an electric cover if you so choose to use an electric cover. Now the catching down through the middle here, we've got our feed, which is the same thing as the conveyor. The feed rate, that's how fast, how much material we're feeding off of that chain, the conveyor chain. And the way this works, and I forgot to bring my adapter cable. I wished I had brought it with me so I could plug this thing in and light it up for you so you can see how it works. But these little square windows over here are LEDs that light up, red LEDs. They light up as you go up on the scale. And this is what you use instead of having a rotary dial now that you had on these older ones. You've got a slide scale here. You just bump it up or bump it down, and you light up more LEDs or light up fewer LEDs, or they go up the scale and go down the scale. So it's basically the same as turning the dial, but we just have a slide scale now. Sequentially at each press of the up arrow, one of these will light up as we go up the scale, which means we're putting out more and more material coming off that chain. The chain's running faster as we go up the scale. All right, then the next one over is going to be the spinner. That's the number of lanes that we're covering. Might be 1, 2, 3, or 4 lanes. Now, as a rule of thumb, and I'm asking the whole room in general, realizing there's more municipalities represented, at any given time, how many lanes maximum would you guys ever want to cover? Somebody spit me a number out. 2 lanes? Would that be a safe assumption? Everybody agrees with 2 lanes maybe? That's all you need? Well, let's deprogram 3 and 4 lane then, and because we don't need those. Technicians, you have the ability to do that. The last thing we want is the operator to be able to continue to turn this thing up and throw salt into ditches. It's not doing us any good then. So electronically, we can turn this thing down to where if all you need is 2 lanes, that's the highest setting that will be 2 lanes maximum. So we'll get into that with the adjustments in the second portion of the class about how to program those things. All right, the next one is going to be liquid. Is there anyone in here, I know Lynchburg is now, using a pre-wet? Any other municipality using pre-wet? Okay, so this will be your pre-wet button here. This can tie into the speedometer as well, and it will drive a hydraulic pre-wet or an electronic pre-wet. Now the electronic pre-wet needs a driver because we're driving a 12-volt motor at up to anywhere from 10 to 20 amps. And so this is a very small output, so we got to put it into an amplifier basically to be able to ramp it up for that, that high-powered output on the motor. So there'll be a little box that goes with this to be able to use there. Now, we have some safety buttons over here on the right. There's actually 4 of them. There used to be 3 over here. Now we've turned it into 4. The first one here is going to be body up. That's going to be red. When the body's not all the way down, that one's going to light up and it's going to be red. The next one down is going to be body up disabled. Remember earlier we said on the gray console here, if you had your spreader plugged in properly and wired properly, that you can't raise the bed with a spreader installed. We've inherently put that in here. It's not something that's been added on at a later date. That's been incorporated in here. What will happen here, just so you operators will know, and this is something I get a call about quite often, is let's say the spring of the year comes around, I've been hauling my spreader around, and I'm ready to take my spreader out of it. Well, I back up under the shelter, and I want to raise the bed a little bit so I can hook up my chains and let down and pull out from under it. My problem that I've got, my bed won't go up. And so what we've got here, you're right, what we've got here is you got a little blue light telling you the bed will not go up. But all you got to do is walk around to the back of the truck and unplug the spreader. When you unplug the spreader, then that disables that circuit. This light goes out, the blue light goes out, now you can raise the bed. So you only need to do that when you're removing the spreader from the truck. And so this is your light now to let you know that that bed up is disabled, so you can't dump the spreader out in the middle of the highway. That's the one thing that you need to keep in mind is when you are unloading the spreader back at the job site or at the shelter, that if this light is on, this blue light's on, that bed's not going to raise. Till you go back around there and unplug it, then this light will go out, and now you can raise the bed, get that thing chained up and pull out from under it. The next one we've got here is low/hot oil. That works the same way as it does on these other 2 consoles here. No difference there. It literally shuts the hydraulic system down until we get that thing taken care of, or there isn't a way to override. Now there's a way to override on both of these sets here, and I'll get into that in just a minute with the operators. Change filter, that's the last one. Change filter is an amber color, and just like the other ones, early in the morning, it's normal for that light to light up. The bottom one down there, it's normal for it to light up with cold hydraulic oil until you circulate that hydraulic oil for about 30 minutes or so. As that oil warms up, pressure drops in the filter, light goes out. It's just that simple. So that's perfectly normal for that to occur early in the morning with cold hydraulic oil. All right, the one button we skipped a while ago is a low oil override. Now that's hot oil or low oil is what it should say. It just says low oil override. So this is an override button. And we do have the ability to do this on these other consoles as well, and I need to back up and catch those in just a minute. But let me go ahead and do this one while we got this one in hand. In this case, if the hydraulic system shut itself down and you have the bed raised or maybe the plow on the ground and you need to get back to the shop, if the hydraulic system shut down, you need to pull over the side of the road, you need to shut the engine off, and you need to find out what's wrong, or look around, make sure there's not a blown hose, make sure there's not hydraulic oil leaking somewhere, something like that. So if the hydraulic system does shut down on any one of these systems, you need to pull over beside the road, shut the engine off, and see what the problem is. Now, if you determine at this point that we've got a hydraulic leak, let's say a spinner on the back end, well, we know we can turn the spinner off. You know, that's no big deal. We just turned the spinner off. Okay, now we still got a problem though because the hydraulic system shut down. We lost oil through that spinner line, but I can turn the spreader system off. Now how do I get back to the shop if my bed's raised or my plow's on the ground or whatever? That's what this override button is for. It's a momentary button so you can override the shutdown to be able to raise that plow or to be able to lower that bed to be able to get in a safe condition to make it back to the shop. Now, that being said, let me go off on a sidebar here. There's 4 critical hydraulic lines on these hydraulic systems. There's the big suction line, which is about this big around, it's about the size of a drink can. And then there's a 3/4 inch line, which is about this big around, that comes from the hydraulic pump. And then there's another one that goes over to the filter, and then a small one about the size of my pinky finger. There's 4 critical lines on any one of these trucks. If any one of those critical lines have burst or leaking, you need to leave that truck shut off, and you need to call a technician. He's either going to have to go out there and repair it on site, or you may end up having to tow that truck in. There's 4 critical lines on the older system. The newer system, there's only 2 critical lines. So those are some of the advancements that we made as well. So if you do have a hydraulic leak, for safety's sake, what I would recommend, if you're not familiar with these 4 lines we're talking about, is if you do have a hydraulic leak and you can't see where the leak's coming from, like on the spreader on the back or whatever, best thing for you to do is call a technician and say, hey, I got a leak here, what do I need to do? And maybe between you and him, you can figure out what line it is, and if you can't, then he needs to come out there and he needs to check it out and see what's going on. Last thing you want to do is to have havoc with one of these 4 critical lines, drive it back to the shop. Now you just trashed a hydraulic pump, and when you trash the hydraulic pump, now you've sent trash all through that hydraulic system, and it could be a week or 2 before they get all that stuff flushed out of there and get that thing back online running like it's supposed to and all. You could have a catastrophic failure. Now there's some answers for that. We'll talk about that with the technicians a little bit later on, some solutions to help prevent that. But these are some things you guys need to be aware of, that when you do have a hydraulic leak and hydraulic shutdown for that, as a safety's sake, I would recommend to pull over side of the road, shut the engine off, and call for help and let somebody else make that judgment for you. You're an operator, you're not the technician. He's going to know what these 4 critical lines are before he leaves today. And you might not necessarily know that. So that's what I would recommend for you. And that'll save a lot of grief for everybody later down the road. All right, so that's what that button is for. We pretty much covered all the buttons that are on here. Anybody got any questions about this particular console? Any questions about this one at this point? A lot of programmable features. We'll go over those with the technicians a little bit later on. All right.
When it's too high and override, keep going up and up on the speeds,
Oh, well, that we can set limitations on that. Yes, we can, and we'll talk about that with the technicians and their side of it, that we can set a ceiling. So if we have an operator that we want to give him a window this big instead of a window this big, we can certainly do that. We can dial this thing down to whatever size you want that window to be. Absolutely. We can do that. Matter of fact, on the most advanced system, it's really easy to go in there and set it up as a programmable feature. I've got one customer that has one of our most advanced systems that we got, which is the new ones you're getting now. He says, I want 300 pounds per mile or I want 600 pounds per mile. I don't want anything in between, and I only want those 2. That's all I want. And that's what his trucks are set up for, 300 pounds per mile, 600 pounds per mile, and that's it. The thing about that is when the operator changes it, it logs that into memory, and the memory knows that it got changed and who it was that changed it and when it was changed and where the truck was at when it got changed. Think about it. These things, this is what's happening. That's Big Brother. I know that's Big Brother watching, but these are things that are coming down the pipeline, and I'm telling you operators ahead of time. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean your new truck with the touchscreen on is outfitted with all this stuff, but it can be. It can be. So just be aware. I'm trying to help you out here. I'm trying to help you from getting in trouble. I'm trying to keep you out of trouble because I'm going to tell you up front what this thing can do and how it can get you in trouble. And it's your job to stay out of trouble. All right, so no further questions about that particular one.